Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I'm here with Noma Langamu Shally Moses from HealthyBlackWoman.com. And before I even begin the conversation, I want to ask Noma, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, boys. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and you and I have been part of some heated conversations that are occurring as it pertains to Lincoln University President Robert Jennings. And uh, based on what I've been reading, Professor Jennings or President Jennings has been under fire for some remarks that he made to a group of young women. He was taking the time to go speak to young women, and he was talking to them about all these things that he felt probably constituted or fell under the category of fatherly advice. And one of the things he talked about, which I'm sure people were not comfortable with as well, were in addition to the big stuff, was he talked about the treatment of women from men, and he was explaining, look, don't let men walk all over you. Command the respect that you deserve. A guy will lie to you, and you have to be watchful of that. And this is what men. These are some of the things men do. Be careful. And I think that's good advice. I mean, I'm a father,
Right.
and I tell my daughters the same thing. But then he goes into the category of sexual assault. And when he gets to sexual assault, he talks about three cases on his campus where women had accused men of rape. And based on what the video seems to be saying, it sounds like he's referring to cases that were false accusations, which are probably as serious as actually being a victim, right? And so he actually explains to the young women, look, don't put yourself in situations where you're going to be tempted to later on tell a lie to cover your tracks or to get revenge on somebody else. Well, of course, there was a backlash because somehow people have interpreted his remarks to mean that he's belittling the victims or blaming the victims for being raped or coddling rapists and things like that. And of course, you know how I feel, and I've told people how I feel. I just don't really understand it. But I definitely wanted to get your take on this because you're a woman and I'm not, and and so give me your thoughts when you watch this video. What was going through your head?
My first reaction was I really don't think that he's excusing rapists' behavior. He's not saying that rapists should be He's not even saying anything about rapists. Actually, he's talking about young men trying to go to school and being accused of rape when they didn't rape anybody. That's what he said, and he's talking about how those young women can destroy a young man's life by accusing him. And the key here is accusing him when he didn't do it. And they know he didn't do it. And the reason why they're accusing him is because something went wrong in the relationship that had nothing to do with rape. And they know that rape is what will get people's attention and rape is what will ruin his life. That's a vicious and malicious thing to do to a person. And that's what I'm responding to because that's what I heard him say. And he can say that. Like I said, he's entitled to his opinion. His opinion is something that he shared with the young ladies. And, it extended from this is how men see you. These are the things that they do. And then he also talked about, I believe it was three cases where young women falsely accused young men. And he said, don't do that because this is what it does. It follows him everywhere, it ruins his life. With the new regulations, he's probably going to go to jail. And even if he doesn't go to jail, he's going to leave the college because he's going to be expelled. And even if he goes to another college, they may not accept him because this is going to follow him, regardless of whether he did it or not. So I don't take issue with anything that he said.
Well, it almost looks like you can really if you take the male-female dichotomy here, you can split it into four categories, right? On the male side, you've got rapists and you've got falsely accused. And on
Hmm.
the female side, you've got rape victims and false accusers. Now,
Right.
if you look at rapists and rape victims, it's interesting because if you really break down his conversation, he's not talking about either one. He's not
He's
talking.
not.
He's not protecting men that committed rape. I'm sure if you asked him, if you say, "Look, there's video of a guy raping a woman. Do you support him? Do you defend him?" He'd say no.
Right.
And then when you talk about rape victims, he wasn't really talking about legitimate rape victims.
No.
He was saying, I'm sure he'd say, look, if you were raped, yes, the person should be punished. But then you've got the false accusers and the falsely accused, which takes the victimhood or the nature of the crime and it reverses direction. You're talking
Right.
about women who have victimized men just as badly as the men may have victimized women. And it seems like that's what he's talking about. He's saying, look, we have evidence that there are cases where men have been falsely accused and their lives have been ruined because the accusation alone is enough to destroy you. When I saw one of my real good friends go through that, it freaked me out. I didn't know if he committed rape or not. I had never been around when he was having sex, so I didn't assume that he was innocent, to be honest with you.
Right.
But it turned out when they did the investigation that this woman had falsely accused 5 other men of rape in the past, and somehow she got money from this, and I don't understand it. But what I saw was they took him away in handcuffs on his job. He was in jail for 3 weeks. He had to drop out of school. He had to spend every penny he had for his attorneys, and he had to hire a private investigator to find out what was going on because the courts didn't do that due diligence. And then when it was over, they were like, "Oh, sorry, you can go now." Yeah. But his life is in shambles, and the people that saw him walking away in handcuffs, most of those people don't even know what the resolution was. They just know that he was a criminal. And here's the funny part: he was a white guy. He was a white guy. So if that happens to a white guy, what do you think happens to a black man when he's falsely accused? And why in the hell do we think that there's something wrong with talking about that? That's what really bothers me, is just even talking about false accusations leads to these charges that, oh, you're blaming the victim. No, we're not blaming the victim. We're not talking about victims. We're talking about victimizers. Please elaborate on this for us. Help me make some sense out of all this stupidity.
I think there's a sensitivity about, when women actually are raped and then people start attacking the person who's been raped. So I think the people who are reacting to what he said are reacting as if someone was raped and then the victim was blamed or shamed or questioned or, mistreated. And I think you emphasize that and I emphasize that nobody's talking about that. We're not talking about where an actual rape happened. He's talking to young women who have the capacity, because they're women, to accuse somebody, whether they did it, if that didn't do it. So that's what he's talking about. He's saying, look, don't put yourself into a situation where you feel like you have to accuse somebody of something. And the thing is, I can get very clear about that, what that is, okay? There are many situations. There are young women who believe that they have to put on a facade about who they are. And they're one person in public and then they're another person in private. And if their public life and their private life meet, to save face, they'll say whatever it takes to salvage that reputation that they've built in their public life. This happens with fathers and daughters, where a man believes his daughter is the most innocent little virgin ever, and she's doing some other things that he doesn't know about.
Wait. I have daughters. You mean my daughters are not innocent virgins that would never, ever think about having sex? Are you? I'm messing with you. Please continue.
No, as far as my dad's concerned, even though I have 2 kids, I'm a virgin. Okay.
Of course.
I'm a little girl. Okay.
Of course. The stork delivers to everybody. But go ahead.
Yes.
Continue.
So that's what I'm seeing sometimes happening, is that in order to protect that image that's been built, you can't have a young woman say, well, no, yeah, that happened, but I didn't, he forced me. Or even if he didn't force her and he coerced where she agreed eventually, because I hear him talking about the young men have a rap and it's so smooth and, you'll fall for it. And don't think that you're the only one who's falling for it. There's other women who may fall for it. He's actually giving them valuable information, giving the young women valuable information that, look, he can talk you into something that the following day you'll regret. And a lot of times why a young woman would regret it the next day is he said everything she wanted to hear, but he doesn't have to follow through the following day. And then when he doesn't follow through, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of shame, there's guilt, all this other stuff. And the only thing that she can think of, that's not the only thing you can do. The only thing she can think of is, I want him to feel as bad as I'm feeling right now. And what worse way than to say he's a rapist, And then everybody does give him that attention of, oh, what a horrible person you are. You did this horrible thing. But that's how she feels about him, even though he didn't commit the crime. So I completely understand what he was alluding to, and I don't understand why that is wrong. I don't understand why you can't tell people that, look, even if it's tempting to say this about him, don't say that about him. And he kept emphasizing, if it's not true. Because if it's not true, then you're ruining his life. It follows him everywhere. It goes on his record. He could go to jail. And even if he goes somewhere else, everybody's going to know that he's the guy who got accused. When you're accused, it's like, even, with being a teacher, when you're accused by a student of something, even if you get exonerated, you'll forever be the person that was accused. And that's almost as bad as the person who was found guilty. The accusation follows you everywhere. So I don't see what the problem is. And as far as the people who are having a reaction to what he's saying, I want to address it and say, when you attack people for things that they didn't do, you almost invalidate the people who mean well. And when you are a young woman who's accusing a young man who didn't do something, and again, you're doing damage to the young women who actually were violated, because now we have to question them when they say I was violated, because we don't know now. People tell the truth sometimes, and sometimes they don't. And yeah, the question has to be asked: are you telling the truth? You don't get a pass to just accuse and then not be asked if you're telling the truth or not. The justice system doesn't work that way.
Well, it is interesting, though, because it almost seems like you have people who literally almost seem to believe that if you are an accuser, no one has a right to question
Exactly.
the sanctity of your accusation, and that is bullcrap. That is, I want to say bullshit, but I'm not going to cut, so I won't say the word bullshit, but we know what it is. It's unbelievable. It's
Yes.
no. If you accuse someone of something that's going to potentially ruin their life, then people have a right to ask you every detailed question that they need to ask to make absolutely sure that this person is truly guilty of the crime that you're saying that they committed. You don't have a right to go and ruin somebody's life just based on hearsay or based on your word. And I think this is really important. This conversation has to be had for anybody who cares anything about any black man anywhere in their life. Because we know that for black men, the trial, judge, and jury, all that happens in the accusation most of the time. When you're accused, you're done. You are
Right.
done. That means, because when Brian Banks out in California, the football player who was falsely accused of rape, who did a bunch of years in prison, when Brian Banks went to his lawyer and said, I'm innocent, I want my day in court, I want to testify, I want to tell people what really happened, his attorney said, no, you need to take the plea and go to prison because you're a big black man, no jury is going to believe you. And so what really bothers me, what shows me the racism that exists in some parts of extreme feminism, and I'm pointing this out here, the racism of it all is that they somehow believe that the rights of these falsely accused men just don't matter. That, look, it's so, I kid you not, Noma, I remember someone saying, well, false accusations happen so rarely that we're just offended that you even brought it up. Well, my response was, to hell with you. You go to hell with that, because we need to talk about this. Everybody deserves to have their rights protected. And if you're going to go through all this trouble, think about this. A lot of people will say, well, instead of warning women how to avoid being raped, we need to tell boys not to rape. That's another one of the little taglines they love to parakeet
Right.
and say over and over again. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. Okay, so think about this. You're having all these conversations with millions of men, most of whom will never rape anybody. And you're telling all these young, all these innocent guys, like, don't rape women. That's bad. Okay, fine. We'll accept that. But don't then get upset if we take the opposite approach and say, look,
Right.
let's tell women, don't falsely accuse men. Because most of the women aren't going to do that. Most women are not going to falsely accuse someone of rape, and that's where legitimate victims deserve their respect and their support. But we also have the right to tell all these women, like, look, if you get in a situation that's embarrassing to you or whatever, or the allegation isn't true, then don't do it, because you're really going to hurt somebody if you tell a lie like this. You're not just hurting the victim of your lie, you're hurting all the legitimate victims of sexual assault out here who are going to have a harder time proving their case, because nobody believes it, because you got people out here crying wolf. So
Right.
so I would just say that what's just so problematic here is that I just see a lack of justice. I don't see equity in terms of how this president was treated. I see us in a situation where we're in the middle of this very important political battle that has to be fought. We have to fight this. We have to fight against this kind of tyranny that's occurring, where people are trying to squash every voice out here that just asks for some sort of common sense and fairness. There's nothing in what this man said that in any way condones the idea that rape isn't a big deal. He's not a Bill Cosby. He's a guy who just said, look, if it's not true, don't say it. There's nothing wrong with that. If anybody disagrees or has an alternate point of view, then fine, express that other point of view, but bring logic, bring evidence, bring a solid argument. Because what you'll find is that people who have the other point of view, the people that want to pile on this guy, they don't have any logic to really back up what they're saying. They're just reacting based on emotion or sheer political will and wanting to get their way, no matter who gets trampled in the process. And that's just wrong. I mean,
Right.
we have to stand up
you.
against that.
I agree with you. And, I think you mentioned that he actually ended up apologizing publicly for what he said. And that makes me even more sad, because now he meant well, and he said what he said, and it was valid. But it has been invalidated by that bullying that you described, where the voice that's saying, no, you cannot say that, is so loud and so powerful that he now has to wonder, okay, if I don't apologize, am I going to lose my job? And of course, he has to then, okay, I get it. You didn't like it, and I'm sorry I said it, and hopefully peace will be restored. But imagine if he didn't have a job. Do you think he would have still apologized? I don't know. I think maybe not. He may have stood his ground and said, no, I have the right to give advice, and I gave advice. And if you're misconstruing what I'm saying, that's your problem, not mine. I stand by what I said, and this is why I said it. And maybe he could even clarify what he was saying. I think one of the problematic things was, don't put yourself in a situation. And then it's like, oh, what do you mean? How do you put yourself in a situation? Well, he didn't say don't put yourself in a situation to be raped. No, he said don't put yourself in a situation which is questionable, so that after the fact, you're going to have the shame and the guilt and all the feelings that go with it that will cause you to be tempted to accuse somebody of doing something they didn't do. That's what he meant. That's what he said.
And also, he didn't, he's saying, look, if you don't want to have to answer hard questions about what was going on and why you were there and what you were doing, then maybe you shouldn't do it, right?
Exactly.
Because no matter what happens, I mean, we know in most cases, I believe that most of the time when someone's accused of rape, there is a strong possibility that the person's guilty, and that should be considered. But to me, it's sort of like, if you talk about just this general discomfort of having to explain yourself, I would argue that if you don't want to explain what you were doing, then you probably shouldn't do it. Because even if the person did something wrong, then it only makes sense that the courts would have to do due diligence and carefully ask 1,000,001 questions to make absolutely sure this person's guilty, because they don't want to send an innocent person to prison. And again, common sense coming out. Please continue.
Yeah, so I was saying that it does seem to be that people are thinking that he said, well, if you don't want to be raped, don't put yourself in a situation to be raped. That's not what he said at all. And I think that's what people are responding to. And I think what he said was, I just wanted to encourage people when he was apologizing. He said, I was just trying to encourage people, in this case, young women, to take responsibility, personal responsibility. And every parent wants that. And the sad truth about the America that we live in now is personal responsibility is becoming a heavier and heavier burden. Now when your son goes out, his personal responsibility is a heavier burden than anybody else's. That's something I shoulder. You have to act a certain way to save your life. And that's a fact. And he was just encouraging them, in order for you to be safe, to not be taken advantage of. There's so many things that he said, even though the focus came on to only one thing. He says, if you don't want guys to take advantage of you, conduct yourself in a respectable way. Listen to them. They lie a lot. Pay attention and don't be lied to. He said so many things that I was giggling, and I said, you know what? I like him. And then they took one thing and, out of context and blew it up. And, while I appreciate that there are women out there who do fight for women to be treated equally and to not be taken advantage of and to not be violated and all those things. Again, we do damage to even that cause when we overextend it to things that don't apply. And in this case, what this man said, what President Jennings said, does not apply. It doesn't apply.
Absolutely, and not only does it not apply, but this attack really, I mean, I see it as a racist, tyrannical attack. I mean, and I say racist because, you know, I think that this man who's speaking in a way that advocates for those who are falsely accused, many of whom are African American male, you know, the fact that his voice is squashed so quickly. Without regard to what's happened to all the men that have been victimized by false accusations over the years.
Right.
You know, that to me is a form of structural racism because, you know, the extreme liberals and the extreme feminists, they have the big platforms and all the money, and so they can kind of push their agenda forward, you know, and just really become sort of engage in this almost Nazi-like attack on anybody who disagrees with them. And I just think it's wrong. And in fact, they've even used their money and their power to enlist many, you know, certain African American males, maybe in academia and other places, to literally label themselves as feminists, where they will fight more on behalf of some of these weak ideologies than they will for even other black men. And I just think that someone somewhere needs to speak up for African American males and make sure that justice is served so that we can have some sort of balance in these crazy conversations. So that's all I have to say. I want to say thanks for providing this perspective, Nomalanga. It's really been helpful. Okay.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, the pleasure's all mine. And also to everybody who's watching, I want to say thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. If you disagree, if you agree, if you have an opinion, use your voice. Don't remain silent. Say something, even if you just write something on Facebook. You can be a Facebook revolutionary, and I'll still have your back. But we have to use our voice. We cannot remain silent. We cannot let the bullies win. We have to make sure there's justice and equity. So even though President Jennings has to back down because he's got a job and he has to protect his job, and I don't fault him for that one way or the other, I'm not going to worry about that, and I don't want you to worry about that either. If you believe in something that represents what you think is truth and justice, then stand up for it. Don't be silent. That's all I want to say. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Please take care. God bless. We're gone. Peace.